So, one of the best things about being in a congregation is that if we're intentional about it, we have an opportunity to get to know new folks. And whether or not you realize it, everybody that you look at here today, whether or not you know them, is remarkable in some way. Just absolutely incredible. And you may not realize it. If you look at somebody sitting near you, they have something, probably many somethings in their life that is just remarkable that you need to hear about. That will be a source of inspiration or comfort or something like that for you. So be aware of that as we sit here, you might, it's easy to just look around and say, yeah, just a bunch of regular old folks, but that is absolutely not the case. In this gathering right here, you have scholars and adventurers and counselors and every kind of imaginable person with every kind of imaginable story, survivors and poets and artists and coaches and comedians. I mean, all of that is represented right here. One of the great blessings of being in ministry, being a clergy person, and I imagine Derek can echo this, is that as we move from appointment to appointment, our circle of loved ones, the people who we have been blessed to get to know, expands each time. And so looking back now over my appointments, I'm just in awe and so grateful of the people that have let me into their lives. And this morning, I just wanted to share a brief story as we start of one of them. It's a couple named Dave and Kay. Interestingly, I have 3 couples in my history named Dave and Kay. Like somehow they're attracted together. But this particular Dave and Kay are from or were in Southern Oregon. And they came to visit us, Rachel and I and the family, a couple years ago when we were still on Whidbey Island. And they spend a lot of their time traveling. But they travel in a very unique way. They've got a little RV. And when they're going to see somebody specifically, they do it like any sane person would. They put in an address in their GPS and they get there. But if they're not visiting somebody, they travel in this really peculiar way. They have note cards in their little RV. And they will first take the first stack, and it's actually a little bigger. I just did the cardinal directions. They have west and east and south and north, but they actually have the diagonal directions to northeast. I don't think they go like all of them. So they shuffle them up, and then Kay or Dave might pick one and say, okay, we're going to go west. Right. You get where I'm going. And then they have hours and minutes. They have 10 minutes and 20 minutes and 1 hour and all of that. And they shuffle them up, right. And then they might be like, okay, we're going to go west for, let's see what we get here, see where our adventure is going to take us, 45 minutes. And so that's what they do. They go west for 45 minutes. I wish I could put some tape here. And then when that 45 minutes is up, what do you think they do? They shuffle them up again, and that's how they travel. Right. It's hilarious and wild, and I would just say I would rather stick my head in a hornet's nest than travel that way. But they love it. They shuffle them up, and that's how they travel. And they just explore the country a couple of note cards at a time. And that is way, 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 way too unplanned for me. Now, my wife would be all over that. I will say this is right up her alley. Even though, like, her line of work, she's a financial advisor, she's very organized and very structured, but deep in her heart, I could see this in our future when we retire one day. I like things, and this will come as a shock to some of you, I actually really like things to be mapped out and scheduled. Before we set out, like if we're going on a road trip or a vacation, I want to know where we're stopping for lunch. I have it figured out where we're going to get gas. I want to know where we're stopping for the night. I mean, I like things to be planned out. For me, and there's going to be like 2 people in here who you're going to be like, oh, he gets me. The best part of a trip for me is the planning and packing. The trip is kind of a hassle. But for me, knowing like, and Linda's nodding her head. She's like, yeah, that might be me too. Yeah. But some of you, I imagine, are going to have a hard time believing that because especially since we've gone to the co-pastoring in these two churches together, that sometimes it might seem like things are not scheduled or planned enough. And that's why, at least for me, emotionally and personally, this whole merger thing of trying to bring two congregations together, each that are very similar, because you're extraordinarily similar, but you're also unique. You have your different hopes and dreams, different histories, and trying to bring those together in a way that is at least partially organized and scheduled has been a tremendous challenge. Because by its very nature, and the folks on the merger team will probably nod their heads in agreement, bringing two congregations together by its very nature resists organization. It doesn't want to adhere to schedules and plans and roadmaps because it is about people. And it's about all of these different variables which you don't even know are variables until they pop up. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat down at one of my two office desks and gotten a big piece of paper out and wrote, this week, next week, the following week, and had all these markers, and then I'd be like, okay, now it's organized, and then something would pop up. And it was all I would literally do is go, all right, I guess that one's done, and then get out another sheet of paper and try it over and over again. And I've tried to wrestle it into shape, and it just does not behave. And that causes me anxiety, great anxiety at times, and no doubt for some of you, it causes great anxiety as well. I've had some good laughs. One of my learning curves, Derek, maybe you are well more schooled in this. Moving to the Pacific Northwest has brought me into the contact with more engineers that I have ever been around before. And I never realized what a unique personality type engineers are. And those of you who are laughing, I think, is there some truth to this? And it took me a while to understand that engineers really like blueprints and schedules and organization, and which is marvelous. So I worried for our dear engineer folks, because whether you're on the merger team like Bob or just in the congregation, that this whole experience, particularly for the engineers, has probably been borderline traumatic. And for that, I apologize. It's been a little traumatic for me too. Which, when I read today's text, when I revisited it, it kind of made me chuckle inside. Because it's talking about our future. And when we read this passage, when we hear this passage, I have a feeling we hear it incorrectly. Because what we think it says, or maybe what we really, really want it to say, is God says this: surely you know the plans I have for you. Right? Surely, and you could insert the airplane movie, and don't call me Shirley. Somebody needs to do that, thank you. We want the passage to say desperately, surely you know the plans that I have for you. But it doesn't say that at all. It says, surely, thus says God, I know the plans I have for you. Period. Full stop. Nowhere in there does it say, and you get to know them too. Nowhere in there does it say, and what I would really like is for you to look over my proposed timeline for you, for these congregations, for your life, and then we'll work on this together. It doesn't say that at all. It says, surely I know the plans I have for you. And, there's that cliche about, humans plan and God laughs. And it's a cliche for sure, but there's some truth in there. Frustratingly, we don't get to know. We don't get to see the map. We don't get to consult the blueprints or the calendar as much as we want to. We just don't. This text, as we spend time with it, I think it's important to remember that this wasn't specifically written to these two congregations prescriptively. I don't think the prophet Jeremiah sat there all inspired and said, I am going to write this because 3,000 years from now, there's going to be two congregations in Washington who are going to be doing this. And there's always a bit of a danger in reading scripture passages prescriptively, like this is meant for us. This was actually meant for a traumatized community, a community who had lost everything. If we go back to our biblical history, the Israelites were taken into exile, forced into exile. The Babylonian Empire had invaded and destroyed Jerusalem and then taken a large part of that population away. And so Jeremiah was writing to a population of people that had powerful changes forced upon them, none of which they chose, none of which were welcome in their life. Everything was disrupted. Their livelihoods, the places they called home, their patterns of life, their worshiping life, all of that stuff was disrupted. And that's who Jeremiah was writing to. And the entire book, and it's worth spending time with, basically asks a question. How do you go on? How do we go on after experiencing disaster and tragedy? How do we go on? And Jeremiah's advice, if we just make it very modern, make the best of it and build a life. That's what, in a nutshell, that's what Jeremiah is saying. You are where you are. You can't wish your way out of any of this. So make the best of it and build a life. And then God will do God's thing in God's time. And look for God. This is also what Jeremiah says. Look for God even when you're in exile, even when you're in a place where you don't want to be. For God will be there. When we hear this text, when we read this text, I have a feeling that the line that jumps out at us, because it's a reassuring line, and it's the focus words for our stewardship campaign, where God says, you know the plans I have for you, ... to give you a future with hope. And we like that line. There's a reason we chose it for the stewardship campaign, is because we need hope. We all need hope. And we need to believe and to trust and to be assured that there's something good in our future. But the line just after that is, I think, the one that's just as important. And this is Jeremiah speaking for God. So hear God saying this. It says, even in this place of exile, if you seek me, I will let you find me. Isn't that an incredible line? Even in the midst of all of this that is not good, that you have not chosen, if you seek me, I will let you find me. Many of us today, myself included, are probably in situations that cannot be changed, no matter how much we would like them to be different. Many of us today are dealing with family stuff or medical stuff, mortality stuff. As two congregations, we are in a place that we did not choose. I mean, you all chose to allow me to pastor both churches. But leading up to that, nobody consulted with any of us whether or not we wanted to go through a pandemic. Nobody bothered to ask us if we wanted to do church at a time when societal things have changed enough that doing church is increasingly difficult. Nobody bothered to ask us if we wanted any of that. So the question that Jeremiah asks is our question too. How then do we live? Amidst such difficult circumstances, can we still live a life and a shared life of meaning and hopefulness and hopefully a little joy? Jeremiah says, yeah. In fact, that's kind of the point of the whole book. We can live a life of meaning and joy even when, and especially when, things don't go to plan. Because when do things go to plan, honestly? And Jeremiah points out that the time of exile for them, and maybe for us, might actually just be important. Scholars, the biblical scholars that clergy folks rely on to sound reasonably intelligent when we're up here, tell us that much good came out of this period of exile. In exile, they wrestled with the God questions. They stopped taking things for granted. They stopped thinking they knew everything. And they learned, probably most importantly, that worship could happen anywhere and not just in the temple. Because the temple had been destroyed, right? We learned that no matter which direction we go, west, east, and whether we travel for 10 minutes or an hour, as long as we are seeking, we will find. In the famous words of Tolkien, not all who wander are lost. As we seek, dear friends, so shall we find as we journey together towards a future with hope. In God's grace, I pray, may it be so, and amen.